you can relentlessly pursue the thing that you think you want to do and continuously ask yourself what that opportunity is offering to you and be open to the things that you get to learn along the way. Because something may take you on a different path, and maybe that's the right path also. I had to really confront some of the sort of darkest pieces of what drives us, which is really ego. What mattered most to me when I made that choice is becoming the best business person I could be. And I wanted to learn areas that I would not have the opportunity to learn if I had stayed at the NHL. And I had to understand that that came with some sacrifices, and I was okay with that.
Welcome to In Search of Excellence, where we meet entrepreneurs, CEOs, entertainers, athletes, motivational speakers, and trailblazers of excellence with incredible stories from all walks of life. My name is Randall Kaplan. I'm a serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and the host of In Search of Excellence, which I started to motivate and inspire us to achieve excellence in all areas of our life. My guest today is Jessica Berman. Jessica is one of the most influential executives in professional sports. She's the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, where she completely reformed the leadership of women's soccer and has presided over its explosive growth during the last 18 months. Prior to this role, she served as the Deputy Commissioner and Executive Vice President of Business Affairs for the National Lacrosse League. When she took that job, she was the highest ranking woman in a men's professional sports league. And prior to that, she spent 13 years with the NHL, ultimately serving as its vice president and deputy general counsel. Jessica, it's a true pleasure to have you on my show. Welcome to In Search of Excellence.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
I always start with our family. You grew up in a racially diverse part of Brooklyn to an Orthodox Jewish family. Your mom, Phyllis, went back to school after taking care of you when you were younger and got her PhD. She was and remains a psychologist. Your dad, Ted, who passed away a few years ago, was an entrepreneur who owned a bunch of Gulf gas stations in New York. Can you tell us about the influence your parents had on you and your future and what it was like coming from a Jewish background where you were the minority?
Yeah, well, my parents really stood for and embodied all the values that are focused on work ethic and really focused on people. All of their work centered around building relationships and connectivity in their different spheres of influence. So my dad actually grew up in a family that was an immigrant family, and he got his first job working for his dad in his dad's gas station, pumping gas. And he did that really more out of necessity than because he was looking to make money. Like, you know, my children want to get a job because they want to have financial independence. He was really forced to work because their family was very poor and they needed money to actually buy food. And that really is what stuck with him his whole life. And he constantly was a reminder of that to our family always, which is that your hard work is ultimately the thing that you have control over, and that it is the thing that people remember most about you, and really leaves people with the impression that you deserve to have what you have. And so that's really what stuck with me. And my dad ran a very sophisticated business, but in a not very sophisticated way. He really always kept it to the basics with a Mead composition notebook and a pencil and a ruler. And he did all of his inventory phone calls to his gas station to determine how much gas they had, and really put all of his feelers out into his network. And it was a very sort of like grassroots operation. And I always appreciated that about him, even though we all tried to introduce technology to help make his business more effective and efficient. He genuinely believed that he didn't need that in order to run his business in a sophisticated way. And he actually was able to prove that he was able to do it, at least for his lifetime. I don't think it would have pass the test of intergenerational support and being able to have his children or my children be able to work in the business in the way that he ran it. But it kept him very fulfilled throughout his life. And he ultimately became a provider for our entire, both immediate and extended family. And my mom, she actually was a teacher before I was born. And that really drives her, actually, even still. But she decided when she got married to my dad, which was later in life, it was a second marriage, that she wanted to become a psychologist. And she approached my dad and said, I could either become a psychologist and get my PhD, or we could have a child. And my dad said, I don't want you to have to choose. You can do both. And she was 30 years old at the time, restarting her career in 1977. At a time when certainly the gender equity movement was far from cool or accepted. And my dad, who was very old school and traditional, didn't think twice about saying, well, I'll just lean in at home so that you can live your dreams. And they really embodied a wonderful relationship where they shared responsibilities in our home and allowed my mom to go back to school and ultimately have the career that she wanted to have, becoming a psychologist.
Because you came from a mixed family, right? Your dad had kids from previous marriage, and your mom did as
Yeah. We
well.
were the Brady bunch, except that my parents ended up having me. They called me the love child, for better or worse. It has its pros, it has its cons to be the love child in a mixed family like that. But we all grew up in the same home. Actually, the five kids.
I grew up. My mom's was married a few times, 3 times, and I had 3 stepbrothers at one point. So I grew up for 10 years with a family of 5, and I now actually have 5 kids, 3 from a previous marriage. They're all in college right now, and then I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it is a little bit of a balancing act, right? How you fit in with a bunch of other people. So I've lived it, and now my kids are living it too. It can be very challenging at times.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
When you were younger, you were focused on dance. You took dance lessons from age 6 through college. We're going to talk about the hockey experience when you were 16 in a couple of minutes. But before we do, will you tell us about Title IX, cheerleading, and your high school baseball team? And in search of excellence, what's your advice to those of us on how to deal with our own frustration, at least temporarily, to do something that we're passionate about?
Yeah. I mean, I never really saw an opportunity for playing sports to be a participant on the field in any way, or on the court or on the ice. It just wasn't really presented as an option to me. And I didn't really see any girls in Brooklyn playing sports. I also think it wasn't really culturally relevant in my communities. And so the girls that I knew who were interested in being sporty or athletic, they took dance lessons. And that's really the path I took. And it allowed me to be around sports because of cheerleading, and allowed me to feel the energy around team sports in particular, which I loved. And I also, through that, got to know a lot of the coaches and the administrators around athletics. And once I started to sort of unlock my interest in working in sports, in the management or administrative side, I volunteered my time to work as a manager, as a student manager for the teams, which of course now is like a path that exists as a formal internship. But when I proposed that to the various coaches, and in particular the high school baseball team, he was like, sure, you can sit on the bench and keep stats instead of my assistant coach. Why not? And so I just tried to find odds and ends jobs to make the coaches' lives easier so that they would invite me to hang around and learn more about the business of what it meant to play sports in high school. And it gave me a great learning experience. So I just found ways to make myself useful and offer a value proposition when I knew time was limited for these coaches, and they were all teachers and needed an extra set of hands.
So you wanted to play sports, and there were no school basketball team growing up. I know you went to a Jewish day school, and then I think in high school you went to a public school, but the public school didn't have a girls' basketball team or any
They
women's team.
did. They did. I didn't really see myself there. I I had no idea what would be the path to me being on a team. It was never something that seemed natural to me or accessible to me. That could be the, Billie Jean King, see it to want to be it. That could be that my parents never really knew about having me play in like a little league or anything like that. It just wasn't really available to me.
So let's talk about you're 16 years old. You're at a hockey game. You had a boyfriend. Tell us about what he told you, what your goal was, why you knew it was your goal, professional goal at that point in time. And tell us about the Nelson Mandela quote that you're so fond of.
Yeah, well, I was at an Islander game when I was 16, and I guess some of the backdrop is that I did attend Jewish day school until I was in 8th grade, and then actually went to my parents and said that I had observed that I was enmeshed in this very diverse community around me, but I felt like I was sort of in a bubble and shielded from all the people from different backgrounds that were around me in Brooklyn. And so I created an opportunity for myself to go to public school, which my parents were confused about why I would want to leave private school. My stated goal was really to understand the community where I came from, and I just wanted to be around what I described as like different people, real people, people who came from different backgrounds. I didn't want to just drive past them in my car as we went to and from school. I wanted to actually meet people who had different life experiences, and so I went to James Madison High School in 1991 as a freshman, and it was my junior year. So this was after really 2 years of me having had the history before high school of wanting to learn, being very interested in people who were different from me, but not feeling like they were accessible. And then being in a school where I was very much the minority. It was the opposite of being in private school. And I was always interested in understanding ways to combat social challenges and racism in particular. I was always very interested in trying to understand the experience of the Black community. My neighborhood was very much in bed within the Black community. And a lot of my friends in high school were part of the Black community. And I spent a lot of time in their homes and trying to understand what their life experience was like, and really trying to understand, although I don't know that anybody called it then privilege, but really trying to understand what privilege meant. And as a result, when I was at this Islander game when I was 16, and I was just happened to be sitting next to these two people and was just engrossed with this vision of the way that sport had the power to unite everybody in this arena. 20,000 people were cheering and screaming for the same thing, everyone wearing their blue and orange jerseys, but also coming from very different backgrounds. But in that moment when the Islanders scored and I saw these two people embrace, I had an epiphany moment that really changed the course of my life, and decided that I wanted to work in this industry that I felt really truly had the power to change the world. And my accuracy check, my fact check is that, yeah, I did have a boyfriend in high school, and he has since validated that my memory serves me right, that I told him when I was in high school that I wanted to one day I had the aspiration of being a commissioner of a professional sports league, which of course seemed like a crazy goal, and fortunate that made a lot of the right choices, but also got very lucky along the way to end up in the situation that actually manifested my life dream.
And can you share with us the Nelson Mandela quote?
sport has the power to change the world. It actually goes on to say it has the power to unite communities. There's a whole series, a whole sort of phrase and mantra that follows that really speaks to this idea that, in particular for children, that sport is the ultimate equalizer in meritocracy. And when they have the opportunity to either experience it or observe it, it can change their hopes and dreams in ways that few other things in our social fabric can.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate, and I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey, and at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video.
I think it's amazing that you were born, it sounds like, with the desire to participate in a diverse community, and you were interested in social change in high school. I don't know many people who are. I went to a private school, and it was very racially and religiously diverse. My younger kids go to public school. My kids in college went to private school. I can tell you the demographic makeup is completely different. And I love the fact they go to public school. But what's your advice to people who, or parents listening, because there aren't a lot of 16-year-olds listening to my podcast, to get their kids more aware and more involved with this social change? Because I think right now we're seeing an all-time divergence or a hardening of social views and canceling culture, and I don't think it's good for anybody.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about it, and actually recently have thought a lot about it. I think a lot of what opened my eyes to this, yes, it was definitely that I grew up in bed within this very diverse community, but it was also my Jewish education, which might seem counterintuitive because it was a private school, but in my Jewish day school, we were taught that every human has basic human rights and deserves an opportunity to be successful in life, should be treated with respect and dignity, that no matter the person's background, no matter the color of their skin, no matter the socioeconomic status, no matter their religion, no matter their sexual orientation, no matter their gender, that it's our responsibility. And this was taught to me as someone who, as part of our Jewish identity, that it was my responsibility to look out for other marginalized communities. This is part of what is embedded within our traditions and culture. And as a result, yeah, I've just been on this life pursuit, and it was reinforced in my home with my parents, where it's part of our culture to retell stories of the past and understand historical oppression and recognize that history repeats itself, and that it's our responsibility to change the future if we don't like the result, and to make sure people understand what has happened in the past and why, so that we don't make the same mistakes again.
One of the main goals of my podcast is to inspire and motivate people to achieve their dreams, no matter how small the odds of success are. You're 16 years old. You want to be a commissioner of a sports league. I mean, it's hard to make a professional sports team, but I don't know how many commissioners there are, but if I do the math in my head, I think it's less than 10. So what's your advice to everybody out there? I know so many people want to be a head coach of a professional football team, soccer team, hockey team. They're dying to get a job, an internship at these professional teams. What's your advice to all the people out there who say, gosh, am I ever going to be able to get one of 10 jobs or even 100 jobs, or a job at Goldman Sachs or Citadel, for example, where they had, if you can get this, 29,000 applications for summer internships?
Wow. Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think it's to be focused on the things that you really care about and want to do, and be unrelenting in your pursuit of those things, but also be open along the way to other things that might interest you and recognize that there's probably a lot of ways to quench your thirst for whatever you thought you would achieve. And yeah, like this was like square peg, square hole. I identified this as my goal and I achieved this goal. But I think I could also say with certainty that I would have been happy in my life and felt fulfilled with the variety of other things that I've accomplished and experienced and would have experienced had this opportunity not happened. So I think both can be true. You can relentlessly pursue the thing that you think you want to do and continuously ask yourself what that opportunity is offering to you and be open to the things that you get to learn along the way and the people you meet, because something may take you on a different path and maybe that's the right path also.
Let's talk about college. We'll switch gears. After high school, you went to Brandeis for a year. Then you transferred to the greatest school on earth, University of Michigan, where you majored
Go
in
blue.
sports. Pardon me? Go blue.
I said go blue.
Go blue. National champions this year. Greatest. So great. I was on campus in 1997 when we won the national championship that year. But this is just an amazing, amazing year. Sorry we lost the coach, but we'll go out on a high note. This is going to live for quite a long time. So go blue.
Yeah.
So you transferred to Michigan, majored in sports management. I believe most of the reason was because your cousin Eve Rotsky was there, and shout out to Eve for introducing us and making this happen. So I appreciate you so much. Can you tell us what you did with our hockey, football, and baseball teams, and what's your advice to us where there isn't a clear path to get the kind of experiences we want and need to pursue that we're passionate about in our future?
Yeah. So with each of those teams, it was not all that different from what I did when I was in high school, in that I found a way to make myself useful to the sports department and the coaches and the administrative staff, knowing that they had lots of responsibilities. And in particular at Michigan, I was actually there in the late 90s as well. And it was really on the precipice of becoming a real business. And they actually didn't have formal internships. There was no stated path to go and be the manager of the Michigan hockey team or the manager of the baseball team or the football team. And I found jobs to do that would help the coach and the administrative staff. So I wrote press releases and I prepared athletes for interviews and I kept stats during the game and prepared the media notes that would be distributed after the game so that the press would write articles about the players. I worked in, it was a form of PR for the teams, and used it as a way to really learn more about the business and to get work experience in the industry.
So you walked into the athletic department office, which today there's a statue of, I think, Bo Schembechler right outside. And you just walk in and you say, "Hey, I'm Jessica. I want to intern for one of the teams." I think today they'd probably laugh at you. It sort of doesn't work that way. So how important is it to basically be able to cold call, walk into, it could be a major university sports team and just say, "Hey, can I have a job?" And just showing up at someone's door. And then how do you add value once you do that right out of the gate to get that opportunity when there's 500 or 10,000 people who want that job?
Yeah, well, I often think about whether my life would be different if I was growing up in today's environment, because part of how I distinguish myself is actually by showing up and by making my interest be known and going the extra mile in terms of my work ethic so that people wanted to have me around. I worry actually in today's world about the screening mechanism that wouldn't let someone like me probably even get through initial screening. I did well enough in school, but I certainly wasn't A+ student and the person who would stand out on paper necessarily. I was the person who was always willing to outwork everyone and was super diligent and left my colleagues knowing that they could count on me to get the job done, which is hard to communicate on paper. So I've actually said to, for example, my former law firm, when I've screened candidates who are all from Harvard Law School or Yale Law School or Penn, which are great schools and I'm sure very deserving, but like I've actually said to them, like, where is the me? This is the person who went to like a really good school, but not the best school, and did well enough in school, but maybe wasn't a straight A+ student, because I don't know that whether those people are able to break through today. It's so much more competitive and everything is so much more formalized. I think it's really hard to be a teenager or in your 20s these days. I am lucky that I grew up in a time where the things that I'm good at allowed me to stand out. And I often wonder if life would be different if I were growing up today. But that's sort of a side note, more of a just referendum on the state of the world being so difficult and so challenging for kids. The pressure is just so high.
I think that's a great place. And I want to ask a couple of other questions about that. It is definitely a different time. When you and I grew up, there was no Google, no email. You couldn't just jot off a note to someone. You could mail it, or like you did, you could walk in and you could drop it off. But it is different. So what's your advice to people today, how to break through, and how would someone go about working with you as an intern? Are they just going to show up in your lobby? And I hate to use that word because it's stalking, but I've had people just show up at my door. We get a lot of emails. I probably get 50 on LinkedIn every week, which is, hey, Randy, I'd love to meet with you. I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you. I do give meetings to people who earn the meetings. That would be a single space letter, talked about my background and career, the details to show me they've done a ton of work to want to get 15 minutes of my time. And that 15 minutes usually turns into 1 hour. And in some cases, it turns into a job with me or one of our portfolio companies. But what's your advice? What would work with you? And what's your advice to those who need to break through today?
Yeah, this is the other sort of epiphany that I've had in recent years as I've gotten more seasoned or more of a veteran in my industry, is that I actually don't think it's that hard to stand out once you're given an opportunity. I don't know if that's your experience, but I am similarly, because I was given so many opportunities by people in the industry to have informational interviews or networking meetings. Like I still do that actually, probably more often than I should, because it tends to be on weekends or late at night or early in the morning. And I do it mostly on my personal time because I want to give back. I want to give young people an opportunity to learn and grow. And I'm always amazed at how few of them actually follow up and stay connected. I'm so amazed. I tell my kids this all the time. What was the point of them taking that 15, 30, 45, 60 minutes with me? Maybe it made them feel good and gave them confidence to do whatever it is they're doing next. But I find it so strange that if you spend that amount of time with someone who's in a position of authority in an industry that you're interested in, that you wouldn't then take the next step to at least stay in touch. And I would say, if I had to do the ballpark, less than 10% of the people that I do informational interviews or conversations with actually turn it into something that is not transactional. Less than 10%. And to me, that's a travesty. So I actually don't think it's that hard to stand out, because if you do the sort of basic things that we were taught when we were growing up, which is to make a lasting impression, to be authentic and genuine, to stay connected, to reach out when you don't have something to ask for, to build trust in your relationship, it could go a long way. And the people who actually do that end up, it pays back in spades for them in terms of the value for their career, I would think. Certainly has for me.
This episode of In Search of Excellence is brought to you by Sandee.com. SANDEE.com. We're a Yelp for beaches and have created the world's most comprehensive beach resource by cataloging more than 100 categories of information for every beach in the world, more than 100,000 beaches in 212 countries. Sandee.com provides beachgoers around the world with detailed, comprehensive, and easy-to-use information to help them plan their perfect beach getaway at home and abroad, and to make sure you're never disappointed by a beach visit again. Plan the perfect beach trip today by visiting Sandee.com. That's www.sandee.com. The link is in our show notes. Stay sandy, my friends. We have a summer internship program here. It's a 12-week program, 8 to 6. Do not show up 1 minute later. We're going to have a gnarly meeting. Don't pack up at 5:59. We got 1,750 job applications this summer, and we hire 36 every summer. And it's amazing. Some of the kids at the lesser ranked schools run laps around the kids from Harvard, and I hate to even say it, Michigan, because I do favor Michigan students. So if you're going to Michigan, send us, contact us. But this year we hired a guy named Matt Hickerson who went to Biola, and I'm going to guess you've never heard of Biola. I have not either. It's a small religious school about 90 minutes from Los Angeles, and he shows up to tie in a suit and tie his first day. We send a very detailed memo about what to do when you show up your first day. We give them reading. And by the way, I call on people. I tell them 10 hours of work before you show up. And, there's a memo. I'm going to call on you. And first impression, you better know the answer to some of these simple questions. 90% don't. They're embarrassed. And I say, why not? And the room goes silent, like, where am I? What did I do this summer? But Matt continued to distinguish himself, showed up at 6:30 in the morning, left at 9 o'clock. And he was gunning, I think, as most people were, for my mentorship for life. And we have so many interns. It's sort of like a bell curve, Jessica. We've got a third who are there, who just go through the motion. We've got another third, and they want to put my firm on the resume. We got another third who, they do okay. And then we got a top third who just kill it. And of the top third, this is where the margin gets so thin, right? And this is what you're saying. It's the 2% or 1% that just go off on a different path. And they set themselves up for tremendous success in their future. I'm writing a book on this right now. Extreme Preparation, it's called, and we'll talk about this a little later in the show. But people say it's hard to do that. No, it's simple to do that. It takes a few hours, and it just boggles my mind why people don't follow up, don't do things differently, listen to people and say nobody does that. I mean, I get that all the time from my own kids. Follow up. How about FedExing a thank you note to someone after a Zoom call? You'll be the only one who's ever done that in your entire career. That person will remember you forever. And if there's 1,000 people applying for that job, you're now top 5, if not number 1, because nobody does it. But this stuff is so easy to do.
It's very true. It's really not that hard to distinguish yourself. So yeah, I agree.
After college, you went to Fordham Law School where you interned for the National Football League. When you graduated, you got a job at Proskauer Rose, one of the best firms in New York City, specializing in labor and employment law, where you work with the National Hockey League, which is one of its clients. Why did you go to law school? Was a law degree or graduate degree necessary to where you get to where you wanted to go? And what does labor relations have to do with marriage and divorce?
Well, first of all, we now know that I wanted to be a commissioner, and most of the commissioners are lawyers. And so that part exists as a sort of foundational reference. I also learned throughout college, as I was reading the sports business trades, that the underpinning of the professional sports industry, at least in America, North America is labor relations and the relationship that exists between the professional sports leagues and the unions that represent the players. And I realized early in my college days that understanding that foundational relationship and respecting and recognizing that being able to impact the stability of that relationship could unlock the growth of our industry of professional sports. And that was the real reason that I wanted to go to law school and become a labor lawyer. I knew I wanted to work in collective bargaining and wanted to really understand that relationship and be able to negotiate the terms and conditions that really drive the player's experience. And the other piece about labor relations that I was very interested in is really this idea that it's a relationship that you have to learn how to work together. You have to learn how to compromise. You have to learn how to listen. You have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to prioritize. And that is the reference that you're making, which I've said sometimes when I've talked about labor relations, where it's a marriage where you can't get a divorce because you have to learn how to be together. And you can take different positions, you can fight for the things that you care about, but you do it in a way that allows the other to know that you respect them and that you need to work together. And it is different in that way than doing mergers and acquisitions transactions or other sort of deals, more business deals like venture capital deals, where you might initiate or engage in a transaction and then you may or may not have to actually work together in the future. The way that collective bargaining works is that you negotiate agreement and the real work actually begins when you're administering that agreement. And there's numerous opportunities to have to solve problems together. And that's really what I enjoyed most about my time at Proskauer and my years at the NHL. And even still today, working with our union, it continues to be the underpinning of the professional sports industry.
Do you need a graduate degree to succeed in life or get a commissioner job somewhere? Is it even necessary today to be successful? I hear so much talk these days. Some people say you don't even need to go to college. So what level of education is necessary, do you believe, to achieve certain milestones in your life, especially in fields like sports or something related to sports?
I'd like to believe there are many paths to get to whatever the intended result is. It's hard for me to imagine being in my role without having my training, but that's because we all look at things through our own lens. I think being a labor lawyer helps me tremendously, not just in working with our union, but in the way I process information, the way I communicate, the way I think, the way I present. I think all of that is in large part driven by my legal background. But there are plenty of people who are leaders who do an incredible job who are not lawyers. And not all of the commissioners are lawyers. And most of them are, but not all of them. And so I'm sure there's lots of different paths that could make someone successful. I think you just have to lean into the things that make you uniquely successful, that give you confidence that you can perform the tasks asked of you in a particular role. And for me, having a legal background really built my experience, my skills, my confidence.
I went to law school at Northwestern. I hated every minute of it, although I love the school. I'm on the board of the school. I'm happy I went there. But I hated what I was learning. I didn't want to go to law school. It was tough for me to read it, but it was a means to a future for me. And it also paid at the time $70,000 a year. I was rich. When I graduated, I bounced around. I had 3 jobs the first 8 months out of school. It's kind of a long story, but I was fired from my job 5.5 weeks after moving to Los Angeles. There were layoffs. I had $3,000 in the bank. I thought this isn't going well. But ultimately, I ended up working for a firm, McDermott, which you probably know, a large Chicago firm. Then I went to work at Sun America. I got an amazing job. Eli Broad was my boss. He was one of only 3 people at the time to start 2 Fortune 500 companies. And I would have never gotten that job without a graduate degree. And in my situation, even though I learned really almost nothing practicing law, I felt like, and still feel like today, the intellectual training and the way I look at things has been immensely helpful to me. So when people say to me, oh, should I go to law school? I say, well, number one, do you like it? Do you want to be a lawyer? And even if you don't, you should really map out pen and paper if it really makes sense. I know so many people who don't go to good law schools. They spend $150,000 to $200,000 to graduate, and they don't get a big firm job, which today pays $215,000 to start, which is just asinine to me.
Is that what the starting salary is?
$215, and get this, they bill out at $4.95 an hour, some $5.95 per hour. These New York firms, and this is the only profession, by the way, where the clients pay for the professionals to learn on their dime. I've never heard of another profession like that, but for me, I think it has been very valuable. But for most people who go to law school, they're not working at Proskauer or Skadden or White and Case. They're making $40,000 or $50,000 a year to start, and I don't know whether the benefit really pays for itself in the long run. What do you think about that?
Yeah. The idea of living with the debt that comes with law school is definitely something to balance and weigh. So, for me, law school itself was very humbling. It was good for me in that way. It was really one of the first times in my academic life where I was really challenged, and I had to actually really study, and I couldn't do all my extracurricular activities and the million things that I normally do. And I had to really focus on studying and getting good grades, knowing that my 1L year in law school was going to dictate where I was able to ultimately work after law school. And I really wanted to work at Proskauer, so I had to get good grades. And so it was very humbling for me. It forced me to focus and become a good reader, which I really wasn't a particularly good reader before law school, which I think has helped me a lot in my career.
What was the thought process there? Were you nervous and anxious and saying to yourself, what if it doesn't work out? And do I have the courage to actually do this?
Yeah, of course. And I had to really confront some of the sort of darkest pieces of what drives us, which is really ego. And why does it feel good for me to work at the NHL? It's a cocktail conversation. It very much gives you that external validation that what you're doing matters and what you're doing is cool, and you like to see it on SportsCenter, and you like that it's on the front page of the New York Times, and it makes you feel important. And I had to, first of all, acknowledge that. And I think that's a very important thing to acknowledge when you work for a high profile company, a high profile brand. It's okay to say that you enjoy that. It has an outsized influence on society, separate and apart from the substance of what you're doing or the size of the business. It matters to people. It matters in people's lives. And I had to really ask myself, is that enough for me? Like, is that going to be the driving force? Will I be satisfied with my career staying at the place that opens doors and provides fodder in a cocktail conversation if the sacrifice is that I don't actually get to achieve the ambitions that I have in my future, in my career? And I made the choice, understanding the risk that I may be going to a place that no one will ever care what I do or where I am, that it was more important for me to learn. and develop as a leader. And even if it meant I made a right turn and that it was going to be hard for me to come back into the sort of sexy pyramid of professional sports, that was okay. And you know, it sort of goes back to what I said earlier about being relentless in your pursuit of what matters most to you. And sometimes what matters most changes, right? Like what mattered most to me when I made that choice is becoming the best business person I could be. And I wanted to learn areas that I would not have the opportunity to learn if I had stayed at the NHL. And I had to understand that came with some sacrifices, and I was okay with that. I also think I had to sort of dispel this notion that because I left the NHL, it meant that I no longer had it as part of who I was. I really embraced this idea that no one can take away from me what I learned and experienced during my 13 years there. And if that's something that feels like it has value to me, it's still part of who I am, even today. And that leaving doesn't mean you've left it behind. You can take it with you, and you can take the things with you that continue to provide value and maintain those relationships, which I've done, and realize that will keep opening doors for you throughout your career in ways that you can't even imagine.
There are 1.89 million lacrosse players in the United States. 528 colleges have women's lacrosse teams, and 398 have men's teams. There are two professional leagues, the PLL, which plays outdoors, and the National Lacrosse League, which plays indoors, which is known as the NLL. It was founded in 1986 and has 15 teams. And here's one I'm sure nobody knows. It ranks third in average attendance for pro indoor sports worldwide, behind only the NHL and NBA. I want to talk about what happened to your husband, Mark, and the National Women's Soccer League in a little while. But before we do, can you tell us about what it was like as a woman climbing up the ranks in male-dominated professional sports, and your thought process changing jobs, and the conversations you had with your husband and your kids at the time before making the leap?
Yeah, I took the job at the NLL to be the deputy commissioner after several years of soul searching about how I was going to achieve my dreams of being in a position to actually have more influence over the business of a league. And the NHL was an incredible place to learn and develop as a lawyer and then ultimately as a business person. I was so fortunate to work for Gary Bettman for so many years and observe the ways in which he made business decisions, how he managed the board of governors, which were the owners of the NHL, so many of the challenges he had to navigate with the Olympics and performance enhancing drugs and expansion and team ownership challenges and their media deals. I mean, just everything that he was able to accomplish, has been able to accomplish. And all of that created a lot of mutual love and respect for me. And the NHL was very much part of who I was after spending 13 years there. And I had to sort of come to terms with the fact that if I wanted to ultimately achieve my dreams, I probably needed to work somewhere else. And that was a really hard decision for me, to leave the place I love and the people I loved and the people who supported me throughout my career and from whom I learned. But I ultimately decided that it was time for me to work in what I expected would be a smaller sport, a smaller business that would give me a wider purview over more areas of the business than I would be able to do at the NHL. And as a result, when I got this call to become the deputy commissioner of the NLL, I was fortunate that my family was supportive of me taking on the challenge. I have two young boys, and they were and continue to be my biggest supporters in what I'm doing. And we all are very honest in recognizing that there's a ton of sacrifice and compromise that comes with the demands of being a high highly ranked executive in my industry, with all the pressure that comes from it, especially those years in a male dominated industry. And all of that really made my kids only want me to do it more. They felt like I had earned the right to capitalize on whatever opportunities I had been offered, and that we were going to sort of tackle it together as a family. So, yeah, becoming the deputy commissioner, I learned the day of the announcement that I was the highest ranking woman in a male sport, and that I was the first female deputy commissioner. And that was a big deal in our industry. It opened a lot of doors for me in terms of meeting different level of people, different executives in our industry who I wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to cross paths with. And more importantly, gave me substantive experience that ultimately prepared me for this job.
I think that's such a good lesson. When I was 27, I got this amazing job. Eli Broad was my boss. I reported to him. They gave me a managing director title. He was a Forbes 400 person worth, I think at the time, $4.2 billion. Before he died a few years ago, I think he was worth $8 or $9 billion. It was an amazing job. I think I had the best job of all my friends. And if I'm being truthful with myself, I love the title. I had a business card, Randall Kaplan, managing director at Sun America. And I reported to one of the most successful business people on the planet. And like you said, cocktail, what do? You want to be humble about it. And I think I was most of the time. But when you gave out your business card, it was phenomenal. Then I left to start a technology company with 3 other guys in Boston. And someone said, you got one bullet to fire when you leave Sun America. And if that doesn't work out, whatever great name on your resume, no one is really going to care. And I think what you just said is such an important lesson. And like you, I wrote things down. I prioritized. I wanted to learn. I had a t-shirt business at Michigan. I wanted to have my own company one day. I met some really bright people and I took the risk, but it was a very, very big risk. I talked about it with my mom, my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife. And it was finally, do you have the courage to go do this and do something that you want to pursue and have a passion? What I really thought about on the list was making money. And I know people are afraid to say that. And I do coach people, money should not be the number one goal. In later in life, I was 29 years old when I left Sun America. And at that point, you're thinking about getting married. I was getting married, paying for our own wedding. And you do think about, being able to buy a house and provide for kids that we didn't have. But it was scary as shit. I just got to tell you. And we got lucky. You talked about luck. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But things worked out okay. But I can tell you, I bandied this around for 8 months. It was a daily, nightly conversation, an hour a day. And ultimately it proved to be the right choice, but it's very hard. Ego is a huge part of it. Let's talk about soccer, and we'll start with some stats again here. It's the most popular sport in the world. It has more than 5 billion fans, which is more than 62% of the world's population. It is the 4th most popular sport in the United States, behind football, basketball, and baseball. 31% of Americans call themselves soccer fans, and other than pickleball, it is the fastest growing sport in America. The World Cup, which takes place every 4 years, is the most watched television event in the world. In 2022, the men's final between Argentina and France, which Argentina won on penalty kicks after a 3-3 tie in regulation, drew an estimated 1.5 billion viewers worldwide. In 2019, the women's final between the United States and the Netherlands, which the women won 2-0, was viewed by 260 million people, which was more than last year's Super Bowl, where the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles 38-35. That game was watched by 116.1 million people and was not only the most watched Super Bowl in history, but at the time, it was the most popular TV program of all time in the United States. So you're at the NLL for a little less than 3 years. You get a call from a recruiter, and you accept a job as the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League. 25 years after your childhood dream to be a commissioner of a sports league, that dream came true. Can you tell us about the league in general, which I think a lot of people don't know, the number of teams and games, why you took the job, and how you turned a massive landmine into a field of diamonds? Are you looking for your next great gift to surprise a friend, colleague, or loved one? Bliss Beaches makes the perfect gift. This best-selling, bright, and beautiful coffee table book by Randall Kaplan features stunning drone photography from exotic beach locations around the world. It's the perfect housewarming gift, a great addition to any home or office, and a fun and creative alternative to bringing a bottle of wine to somebody's house for dinner. Bliss Beaches is available for purchase on Amazon, where it has glowing reviews and a 5-star rating. Get your next amazing gift and order a copy of Bliss Beaches by clicking the link in our show notes.
Yeah. So the conversation with a recruiter and ultimately getting the job was very surreal. And I remember the final interview, and I always will, like it was yesterday, because I was very intentional about showing up as my authentic self. And I actually remember calling my mom and saying, if I end up getting this job, please remind me that I told them exactly who I was, exactly what my strengths are, and where are the areas that I will need support, because I have a feeling if I end up getting this job, I'm going to have a bit of imposter syndrome and worry about my ability to actually execute this hugely important responsibility. And when I got the call about the job, which was just a couple hours after I left the interview, I pretty much wrapped my head almost immediately around the idea that this was an opportunity that could literally change the world. I had always believed, as we discussed earlier, that sport has the power to change the world, and that historically I had defaulted to working in men's sports because it was the thing that had the outsized influence in our society. But I had this sort of second epiphany in my life where I realized that scaling and growing a women's professional league and proving the value of women's sports as a business in and of itself could change the way that people see women and girls forever. And it was the perfect opportunity for me to actually deploy the exact experience that I had had in my career, both from the NHL and from the NLL, put it all together into one and execute a vision that was really grounded in all the values that I've learned throughout my life, both personally and professionally, and create this foundational pivotal shift in society that I genuinely believe had the tailwinds of the cultural relevance of the sport of soccer that was going to really get people's attention. What I did not know was how quickly that was going to happen. And so I guess some of the stats of sort of like where we were, where we are. So when I joined, the league was in the midst of a league-wide investigation going back to the origination of the league, focused on systemic abuse by coaches of players. And there were a lot of questions.
Just to be clear, sexual abuse and racial abuse and emotional abuse.
Mostly, there were several instances of sexual abuse, and there was a lot of emotional abuse, more in the category of emotional abuse, but really more just the underpinnings of a system that was not built to be responsive to or support player experience. And the league was really on the precipice of a lot of questions of its viability, and franchise values were a few $1 million, slash many people told me they were giving them away for free. We had a teeny tiny media deal with, by way of example, only 6 of our games were available in national broadcast, and the rest were behind a paywall. And the league right before I started was what had made the decision but had not yet absorbed the expansion of 2 teams to go to 12 teams. Fast forward to today, January of 2024, we have expanded. We will be 14 teams this coming season. We sold the team 14 to Sixth Street, the private equity fund, and they're going to be playing in the Bay Area. The team is called Bay FC, and they bought that team for $53 million. So we drove franchise values by more than 10 times. We drove the value of our new media deal, which comes into effect on March 15th when our season starts, by more than 40 times. So collectively, between 2024 and 2027, our broadcast partners are investing $250 million into the league. And we will have more than 100 games on national distribution between Amazon Prime, CBS, ESPN, and Scripps Ion. So all of that sort of in a nutshell, I think, among other records, setting attendance records, setting viewership records, setting sponsorship records, the business is booming and the world has taken notice. I think one of the more fun things that I've been able to do, which is a first for me as a first-time CEO, is build our organization. So when I was hired, I was employee number 18, and we now have 58 employees in under 2 years, and we're actually approved to go up to 82. So we're in active hiring mode, which is super fun. We have a beautiful office on Madison Avenue and 40th Street where our employees come and work and collaborate, and it's a beautiful representation of people who are committed and passionate to the growth of women's soccer.
When you got that call from a recruiter, did you say, "Holy shit, this is incredible"? And then you hang up the phone and you look around your room, say, "Oh my God, this is incredible." And then you say to yourself, "Well, wait a minute, I've never played soccer and I'm not a soccer fan."
Yeah, that was one of the things when I talk about authenticity in my interview. I was not that anybody would have mistook me for a soccer player because they would know based on my resume. But the bottom line was I really genuinely believed at the time that I don't need to have played soccer to do my job. I am obsessed with the things that I don't know, which has really helped me throughout my life. And I've hired really smart people who are subject matter experts in the areas that I don't have experience, one of them being the sport of soccer. And so I would never have the audacity to make decisions about our game without consulting with people who understand our game.
You talk about the value of the team. When I made a little bit of money, a fair amount of money after our company went public, I got a couple calls for soccer teams. I think 2 for women's soccer teams and 1 for a men's professional soccer team. I thought, gosh, who in the U.S. is watching soccer? No one I know is watching soccer, and these teams were losing money. So it's not like there was a big TV deal. I mean, you were paying millions of dollars to just keep the team, and it was more like saying, yeah, I own a professional sports team. Then you have the women's team in LA, and you have all these celebrities, Jennifer Garner, Natalie Portman, Billie Jean King, who own this franchise that I think, if you believe what Forbes and some of the other publications are saying, it's worth $100 million today. And then you have the men's club today, which is the first sports U.S. team that is worth $1 billion. And I know those guys. Larry Berg has been a friend forever. He's an amazing guy. He loves soccer. And it's just, like you said, the appreciation of these teams has been incredible. So you deserve a lot of the credit. I think people are really happy that you're there, the people that I know in the sports world. So just want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you so much. It's a dream come true, literally, for me. So I'm enjoying it, and we also feel like we're just getting started.
Let's talk about the disparity in pay between men and women. And in particular, we'll talk about the World Cup. We'll start there. Historically, there was a huge pay gap between men's and women's soccer teams, especially with regard to prize money at major tournaments like the FIFA World Cup. For example, the total prize money for the 2018 Men's World Cup was about $400 million, while the Women's World Cup in 2019 had $30 million in prize money. When the French men's team won the cup in 2018, they received $38 million. When the U.S. women's national team won the World Cup in 2019, they received $4 million. In the U.S., our women's team has been a dominant force since the women's inaugural World Cup in 1991. They won it that year in 1999, 2015, and 2019, 4 times in total. And despite the fact that the men's team has never won, they were paid much more in terms of salaries, bonuses, and prize money. Last year, Cristiano Ronaldo made $200 million on the field and another $60 million off the field. Lionel Messi made $65 million on the field and $70 million off the field, $135 million in total. Sam Kerr, the highest paid female soccer player in the world, who is considered the best player in the world, made $450,000 last year. Maria Sanchez, who plays for the Houston Dash, recently became the highest paid player ever in the National Women's Soccer League when she signed a 3-year contract with a mutual option for a 4th year, which could earn her $1.5 million over 4 years or $375,000 a year. If we do the math, the top men's player made 533 times more than the top female player. Will women's soccer players ever make anywhere close to these numbers, or at least get to the point where they're making a few $1,000,000 a year? And what has to happen to make women's soccer explode in popularity in the US and around the world so women's leagues can get bigger TV contracts and get these bigger salaries?
Yeah, great question. Well, as a labor lawyer coming from men's sports and having been part of work stoppages where male athletes were getting paid too much money, a lot of the work I did was about salary compression and wage suppression to make sure that there was the appropriate economics for owners to actually pull the revenues that would allow for them to grow the business. That is still, of course, my job to make sure that it's a sustainable business, but it is also true that it is my job to figure out the ways to build a revenue model that will allow for our players to actually get paid. And that is probably one of the most unexpected challenges of my career. And what I would say is that we've adopted the fundamental view that this is not a charity and that we're not looking to ask for handouts, and we therefore shouldn't expect to pay players the type of compensation that male athletes make without the revenue to support it. So we have to build a sustainable business model that allows compensation to grow quickly. So what we need to do is actually build the business, and that's our job. We can do that quicker when fans and consumers are buying tickets, buying merchandise, and watching on TV. Those are the 3 things that we need for people to do. If you want for women's sports and female athletes to have pay equity, we need to grow the consumption of this sport and ensure that people are actually watching, not just talking about it on social media and not saying, why aren't the players getting paid, but to actually show up, buy season tickets, go to a game, watch on TV, wear a t-shirt, tell your friends about it. Those are the ways that we can unlock incremental investment from sponsors and media partners. You can be sure with this new media deal that ESPN, CBS, ION, and Amazon, we are working night and day to drive tune-in so that the investment that they made in us actually proves to be valuable to them, so that in our next media cycle, we can unlock more investment and pay our players more. So it's a it's a cycle of growth, like in any business, and we need to make sure that we're building it sustainably.
We talk about brand names when we build businesses, and you talk about sports, and when we think about it, you've got LeBron James, you've got Michael Jordan. In soccer, you've got Messi, Ronaldo. When we talk about women's soccer players, we don't really have any star. Megan Rapinoe, 16-year career, two-time World Cup winner, 2.1 million followers on Instagram. Alex Morgan, one of the most recognizable players in the game, 34 years old now, 10.1 million followers. You think about the UFC, for example, as well. You have Conor McGregor, and in every major sport league, there seems to be one player, Tiger Woods. People want to go and watch that person. Does National Major League Soccer need a female superstar to help bring notoriety to the league and help propel you forward to the next level where everybody wants to watch her?
Absolutely. We know that, especially this next generation of fans, they care about the athlete first. And we thankfully have Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, who are cultural icons. And with Megan Rapinoe retiring, we absolutely are focused on building that next generation of talent and making sure that they're superstars and they become household names. We're starting to see that with this next generation of talent on the U.S. women's national team. This past summer was probably the youngest national team in the history of U.S. soccer for women's soccer. And in our league, we have, I think we now have 3 15-year-olds playing in our league who are pros and who are incredibly talented. And we have actually seen really good data to support that next generation of fans, Gen Zs and millennials, love watching young athletes. And we actually think this next boom of talent is going to capture the hearts and minds of our country in ways that we're really excited to unlock.
As you know, I live in Los Angeles. You drive down Sunset Boulevard, and an entire building is covered with something about a movie or every now and then a sports figure. I look forward to the day where you see the next female soccer star covering a building, kicking that ball, sweat falling out, or doing something great like that to instill
I
incitement.
think there actually is one. I'm going to find out where it is, of Alyssa Thompson. Um, she's 18. She just left Harvard Westlake, and she is now on Angel City. And she actually played in Sydney this summer at the World Cup. And I do believe that she is on a billboard somewhere. I will find out where it is.
That's awesome. Dana White has become a friend, and he's going to be a guest on my show. And it's interesting. They cultivate superstars, right? So you got Conor McGregor, who's great for the league. He's outlandish. He's a phenomenal fighter. The Fertitta brothers actually met him first, and they left this meeting. They called Dana up and they said, I don't know if this guy's crazy or crackpot. He's going to be a complete failure. He's going to be the best fighter that we've ever seen. Now you have Sugar Sean, who was on my show last week, as the next Conor McGregor. And he said, no, Conor's going to be the next Sugar Sean O'Malley. So it's funny to see the leagues develop, and I think they should help promote their best players. So I think that's great. Let's switch gears. What are the 5 most important ingredients to be successful?
Number 1, empathy. Number 2, hard work. Number 3, at least for me, efficiency. Number 4, relationships. Number 5, contentment.
That's a very interesting list. It's a unique list. I've asked 100 guests that question. Empathy has never been number 1. What does it mean to you, first of all, and why is it number 1 on your list?
Yeah, well, I believe that everything we do in life is a form of trying to influence or sell what you either believe. That could be products, that could be services, that could be philosophy, that could be a vision, that could be a strategy, that could be anything, right? And I believe that in order to convince constituents of whatever it is you're trying to convince them of, you need to understand where they're coming from. You need to start by listening and understanding their experience and meeting them where they are, which requires that, I think, emotional intelligence to not only know yourself, but in order to be empathetic, you actually have to know yourself. And then you have to be able to join someone where they are to bring them along on the journey.
Where does passion fit in, if at all? And do you have to be passionate about what you're doing to be successful?
I think you do. And maybe that could be among the five. I view that more as like table stakes, because I don't even think you're asking yourself questions about how to be successful if you're not passionate. I think it's just like embed within, it's not a choice. You're probably focused on other things or distracted, frankly, if you're not passionate about what you're doing.
One of the things that's contributed to my success, that has made me successful, is something I call extreme preparation. That means when someone's prepared 1 hour, I may prepare 5 or 10. Someone prepares 5, I may prepare 60 or 70, especially for an important corporate presentation that we do. Has extreme preparation been important in your career? Can you give us some examples if it has, and how it's contributed to your success, especially when the odds of success were stacked way against you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the hard work part. And preparation, I think, shows up in both obvious and not obvious ways. So there's the obvious, more traditional preparation where you might do research. I may, for example, as I did, listen to a few of your podcasts to get a sense of sort of the kinds of questions you ask or the people you've interviewed, read your website, so that I'm walking into the situation with sort of a baseline of information that allows for me to feel confident that I can engage in this conversation and show up in a way that I'd be proud of. But then I think there's the non-traditional preparation, which I think is just as important. It's probably not talked about enough, which is your holistic preparation. So, did I work out this morning? Have I drank enough water? Did I eat proper meals? Have I answered the calls of my kids when they called me earlier? If not, I'm probably distracted. Did I set myself up for success in this situation? And so that's both directly, meaning the literal meeting or conversation you have, but also indirectly. What are the externalities that could have me show up in a way that would not be my best self? And what can I do to mitigate that?
You've talked about what it takes to be a good leader. And I think one of the things you've talked about before is something that most people don't talk about because their ego gets in the way, or they just don't want to share personal emotion. But let's talk about vulnerability. Is that important really to be a great leader? And if so, why?
Yeah. And actually, if I had prepared my 5 things, that might have been one of the 5. Because I think in order for, first of all, I think one of the 4 most important things as a leader is to role model the behavior that you expect to see. It's always more effective to do it. Of course, you need to say it, but then you also need to do it. You need to do it, you need to say it, you need to do it. You need to do it, you need to say it, and then you need to do it. And if we want our leaders or any employees to know when to ask for help, to not put themselves in situations that they're inequipped to handle, we have to show them that it's okay to ask for help and to say, I'm over my skis, or this is something I don't know the answer to. And the only way that they will ever feel safe enough to do that is if they see leadership doing that. And in fact, as we know, when we read about imposter syndrome, everybody experiences that in the world. Everybody has moments where they're worrying about whether they're either qualified or able to do X task, X job, manage X situation. And all that you're doing by verbalizing that is humanizing yourself. I actually view it as giving you a position of strength, not weakness, to show that vulnerability, because you've now created a connection with someone that allows for them to feel like you're relatable. And in my experience, the biggest unlock you get from that is that that person is now invested in your success. They now recognize and know that they're part of your journey in a way that actually has them both actively and passively rooting for you. And it's a way to build coalitions around you to be able to show that you can't do it alone, because we're so much stronger when people around us are trying to help us to be successful. If you don't give people a role in that, they don't actually know how to be part of your success or to be there to support you.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate, and I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey, and at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video.
As I already mentioned in my show, my main goal is to inspire and motivate people to get over their challenges on their path to success. And by hearing the stories of successful people like you from all walks of life, I think everybody takes something a little different from each guest that I have. You've talked about what your main job is too, and it's to inspire, fill in the blank.
I would like my legacy to be that you, universal you, in this case me, can show up as a leader in a way that's different from others, that you can be your authentic self and engage in the practices that allow for you and your company or business to be successful, and feel really proud of how you did it and the people you worked with and people who worked around you, and that it wasn't a zero-sum game. That I hope that at the end of whatever my career is and along the way, that the people I worked with and for in the league, but then also my family, feel really good about what we collectively accomplished. Because when I think about vulnerability, what we were talking about earlier, it's not just internally with my staff. I do that with my kids. It's actually the reason I believe this is something I want to write a book about one day. This is like on my list. I think it's the reason that it's one of the main reasons that I've been able to accomplish what I have in my life, because I actually think the most important ingredients or recipe that I've unlocked is how to get my kids to want to make me successful. And so there's not a zero-sum game. They're 100% in my camp. And it was very intentional. It was not by accident that happened. And I feel like there's a lot to learn from that, because I don't ever have to apologize for what I'm doing every day. I feel like what I'm doing is a gift, not just to my staff and my board and my players here at the NWSL, but also to my kids.
That's awesome. I have 5 kids, 3 in college. My son Charlie's a sophomore in college, and he helps and gives me suggestions on my podcasts. He suggests guests. Some of them have been on my show, and they came from him. And it's so cool to say, Dad, I'm proud of you. I love your show. My friends love your show. And I think as a dad, as a person, as a professional, that just lights me up like nothing else. I think as we get close to the end of our show, we've all had a lot of challenges in life. And one of the things that makes us successful is to get through those challenges. Your first husband, Brad, had some health challenges, and I want to know how you overcame those challenges while you had two young children, were working crazy job, long hours, and had to travel. How were you able to overcome that?
Yeah. So I guess the Cliff Notes version of what happened to Brad is that when he was 37 and I was 36, and he was perfectly healthy. What did not have any historical medical challenges. He had a massive stroke at the age of 37 and was in a coma for 7 weeks and was hospitalized for 4 months, and had to relearn how to breathe, walk, talk, eat. And our kids were 5 and 2 at the time, and I was at the NHL during those years. And so it's part of the reason that I have so much gratitude, is because when you're faced with actual life and death with the people you love most, you build a level of resilience that I pray most of the world never has to learn, and gain perspective that I pray most of the world never has to gain. And that situation probably taught me more about who I am as a person, the core of who I am as a person, and what matters most to me than almost any other experience in my life. They say God only gives you what you can handle. And people said that to me when Brad was super sick, and expressed confidence that I could get through it. And of course, at the time, that's not what I wanted to hear, but it was true. I really learned from that experience that I was stronger than I thought I could ever be. And it brought our family so close together, including Brad. We ended up getting divorced, but he's one of my closest friends in the world. We chose to not be married, but we chose to remain best friends. And those years were really hard years where my focus had to shift to caring for him and my children. Thankfully, the NHL was super supportive of me. I focused on the things that mattered most. We engaged in a fundraising campaign for the local hospital where Brad was doing his rehab. We raised $1 million to bring robotics rehabilitation to our local hospital, which he used to rehab and get him to a point where he was not in a wheelchair anymore. All of that was incredible. And as someone who, to take it back to the beginning of our conversation, had dreamed of being a commissioner from the time I was 16, at age 36, I had to recognize that it wasn't in my control to continue to work on my career ambitions, and I had to focus on my family and know that it would either affect my career or it wouldn't affect my career. But at that moment, I made the choice that it didn't much matter, because really what the only thing that mattered in that moment was my family. And believing and trusting again that everything that I had proven up to that point in my career, I never lost any of that. And everybody who knew me and worked with me was always reminding me that no one could take away what I've accomplished. And when my family was in a better place, that I could come back and resume whatever it is the next steps would be, which of course is likely different than it otherwise would have been. But I feel really proud of the way I and my family navigated that very challenging situation.
And he's fully recovered today. Good ending.
He has some challenges. physically and a few otherwise, but he made a miraculous recovery. We were told that he either wasn't going to live or was going to be a vegetable. And he managed to drive again, and he returned to work. He's a tax lawyer. I always thought if anyone I knew almost died, they would change careers. Like you'd like wake up and be a different person. Like that movie regarding Henry. Do you know that movie? I just thought he was going to like wake up a different person, but he wanted to go back to being a tax lawyer, and he works at PwC. And we're both very grateful.
That's an awesome story. Before we finish today, I want to go ahead and ask a more open-ended question. I call this part of my podcast Fill in the Blank to Excellence. Are you ready to play?
Sure.
The biggest lesson I've learned in my life is
love wins.
My number one professional goal is
to feel purposeful.
My biggest regret in life is
not traveling more.
The craziest moment in my career is
seeing the players who were the original whistleblowers, Sinead Fairley and Mana Shim, come back and play in our league last season.
The funniest moment in my career is
seeing how much people care about my rescue dogs.
The one thing I've dreamt of doing for a long time but haven't done is
learning how to technically climb a mountain.
If you could go back in time, the one piece of advice you would give to your 21-year-old self is
it's all going to work out.
If you could meet one person in the world, who would it be?
Nelson Mandela.
The one question you wish I'd asked you but didn't is
who's my hero?
I think I know what you're going to say, but who is your hero?
My dad.
I knew that was coming. That's amazing. Jessica, I appreciate your time today. You've done so many amazing things in your career. You're an inspiration, not only to women, but to a lot of men as well. It's a great story about pursuing your dreams against all odds and achieving your dreams. So I hope this has been enjoyable for you, and I appreciate you being on my show.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your preparation.